So, hello, my name is Rudra, and I'm going to be speaking on linguistic sustainability. Now, what is linguistic sustainability? Linguistic sustainability is an idea that says we as a society have to try our best to make sure no language dies, irrespective of how many or how few are speaking that language. Now, a couple of questions that many people have. The first of which is, how can a language die? Right? How can something that's not living die? Well, a language is termed to be dead when the last speaker of that language, well, dies. And consequently, there's nobody in this world who can read, write, understand, or converse in the said language. The second question most people have is, how does it make a difference, right? Most of the languages that are dying today are minority languages. They're languages that are being spoken by 500 or less people. And a death of such a language shouldn't really make a difference to our nation as a whole, should it? Now, to answer that question, we'll have to take a step back and talk about something closer to us. Some place we call home. Mumbai, right? I think Mumbai is the ideal model to be used while talking about India as a whole, because Mumbai is so diverse, right? The diversity in the city is beautiful, and the diversity in any place is important. Because diversity brings along with it a difference in opinion, difference in perspective, and different narratives. And all three of them are important for any society to grow and to develop. And this is something that can be seen in most metropolitans, this diversity. You have people of different cultures, you have people of different religions, you have people that speak different languages coming to one place and working with each other to earn a living, to start a family, and to move ahead in life. But when it comes to most metropolitans, be it India or abroad, we see one distinct and significant characteristic that really stands out, and that is all of these cities, all these places have a culture of their own. A culture that tends to supersede all individual cultures. For example, you never hear Kannada being spoken on public transport. You never hear Tamil being spoken on public transport. What you hear in a place like Mumbai is Bombaya Hindi and Bombaya Marathi. You never hear Marathi from Nanded being spoken on a bus or on a train. And that's because when you have people from different places coming together in one single place, we need a common language to communicate with each other. And the people collectively have chosen Bombaya Hindi and Bombaya Marathi. When you talk about the cuisines, the traditional cuisines, even they have been modified to be more palatable for the masses. You have food from Maharashtra that is not spicy anymore, so that it can be enjoyed by people who aren't Maharashtrians. And when you think about it, when you go home every day, you're in the clothes that aren't indigenous to your native place. You're not eating food that's from your native place. It's probably homemade, but guess what? The food is still urbanized, isn't it? But when you go home, the one thing that remains with you is your mother tongue. It's the language your grandparents taught you, and the language their grandparents taught them. In a place like Mumbai, when you strip a person of his culture to the bare minimum that does remain is the language they grew up learning. Is the language their parents taught them. And this language is more than just a means of communication. This language is a storehouse of culture. It's a storehouse of knowledge. Knowledge that has been passed down from one generation to the next for centuries. And when you think about the minorities we were talking about earlier, a language that's only spoken by a specific group of people, a small circle of people, maybe a village, maybe just 500 people. These languages don't really have a written text. And language becomes such an important part of their identity, if not the entirety of it. And when urbanization robs these people of their language, it robs them of culture. And in the process, it robs them of their identity. And that's exactly what democracy, or my bad, that's exactly what diversity is against. Diversity loves individualism. Diversity loves individualism. It wants people to come from different parts of the world, but hold on to their culture and spread it. It wants you to share your knowledge that's been passed down to you by your grandparents to the rest of the world. Because that's the true essence of diversity. And it's beautiful. But what happens when we take that away? What happens when we take a language away from a people? Do we take their culture away? Yes, we do. Do we take their identity away? Yes, we do. But how does that affect us as a whole? Right? Let me tell you something, it does affect us as a whole, and in a terrible way. When a group of people forgets to speak a language, when a language dies, so does culture, and so does knowledge. A culture that took thousands of years, if not millions, culture that took thousands of years to make, can vanish in a matter of 2 generations. And because of that, we lose out on thought processes. We lose out on perspectives. Because when a person does not have a language, when a person does not have a mother tongue, he doesn't have identity. And cities do this thing for people, with people who do not have an identity of their own. They club them. City clubs them into a greater majority of people. A majority of people that does not have a native language, a majority of people in Mumbai that does not know the language their grandparents conversed in 70 years ago, 100 years ago. The only language these people know is Bombaya Hindi and Bombaya Marathi. This majority of people doesn't know what their village looks like. And this majority of people does not know what food their grandparents ate when they were young. And when that happens, the overall ideology, the way a community thinks, starts narrowing down. Because we do not have culture to back us up at that point. We do not have a difference in opinion at that time. And that is the exact opposite of what diversity stands for. Because when a society loses out on perspective, when a society loses out on culture, the same society starts growing redundant, it stops growing as a whole. And that's why language, your mother tongue, is so important. Not because it helps you communicate with your elders, but because it sets you apart. And I believe that assimilation is important, and we can't do without assimilation. When you live in a certain place, you should learn the language and you should accept the culture over there. But at the same time, it's not good to give up your culture. You should never give up your culture regardless of where you live, regardless of the circumstances. Always hold on to that. Because like I said, that's what sets us apart from each other. That's the true meaning of individualism. And in the end, when we as a society rob someone of their language, when we as a society rob someone of their culture, we are robbing ourselves of something. We are robbing ourselves of a society where everybody is respected. We are robbing ourselves of development. We are robbing ourselves of humanity. And we are robbing ourselves of sustainability. Thank you.